Thanks, Christy. Thanks for having us, Peter. I'd first like to acknowledge that the traditional owners of the land on which we convene and pay my respects to their elders past and present, Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. Also, my thanks to Peter for having us and putting on a wonderful conference. And I'd also like to thank the Australian Vanadium team. I've recently joined the company, only 3 months in the role. And Vince, Cliff, Gemma, some of the others around who've leaned in and put their faith and trust in me to help them succeed with the business. Thank you so much. I would like a show of hands. Are there any lithium tragics in the audience? No? I'm a lithium tragic. I was in the lithium industry for the last 5 years, and I've spent a lot of that time operating and building lithium mines and working in the downstream in Western Australia, Northern Territory, and in Canada. And my peers in the lithium industry have kind of, in various conversations, sort of said, oh, good on you, Graham, like, well done going into like this niche commodity that no one's heard of. And I would just want to say, seeing the massive value that we've seen created in lithium, if I did one thing today, it would be to convince more people in this audience that vanadium is not just a niche metal and that it has a massive upside to it. And I think currently it's not even merited to be called a niche metal. So listen up, and I want to teach you 2 things today, I hope, or at least be open-minded to thinking, is vanadium a really interesting metal? And is Australian vanadium a really interesting investment in that space? The usual disclaimers, please, in your own time, read these and do your own research. So why vanadium? And I think the key here is vanadium is literally classified as an industrial metal, and that's in the steel industry. It's a critical metal, and it's used in aerospace and defense, and it's also a battery metal, and I've said here battery metal squared, and why I say that is we have a moment in time here where vanadium redox batteries, which are really technically and economically merited in grid scale applications, are moving from what was previously historically 2% of the world's vanadium supply to what in 2022 was 6%, and this year will be at least 10% of the market. So we are at a really interesting inflection point in the battery metals market. And the next horizon of battery growth, for those of us who like to dream and think about where else vanadium might play a role in the whole decarbonization thematic ahead of us, I would encourage you to look at the many different technology research entities in the US in particular who are looking to commercialize vanadium with its unique properties in batteries. And there are some really advanced opportunities there on both the cathode and the anode where vanadium can and will play a role, I think. So that's the dreaming side. Let's move into a bit of detail. Don't take my word for it. Please open your ears and your minds and listen up to what's happening in the industry. There is a serious consensus. To give you some insight, I just attended a ferroalloys conference in Singapore, and Wood Mackenzie did a presentation where I was so pleased to see it was a comment about what should steel producers be worried about in the supply chain with respect to battery metals. And in that presentation, right next to nickel and manganese was vanadium. And the conclusion of that presentation was, should you be worried about supply? And the answer was vanadium, yes, manganese, no, nickel, yes. So have a listen. Terry Perlis, who's someone we respect most in the industry, he says, assuming even modest growth in vanadium consumption in energy storage application, i.e. VRFBs, the industry will be challenged to meet the surging demand. And my comment today is new mines are required to meet this demand. And so what does this demand curve look like? This, I would say, is one of the more conservative forecasts. This is Terry Perlis. There's others out there that are bigger, but I think the point is even this demand forecast is pretty daunting. And at the bottom of that demand curve, you see if we reach full capacity with our asset in its current configuration, we sort of only make a small drop in the water. And what we intend to do is to become a near-term producer that will produce between sort of 6-7% of the world's supply. I think that'll only be, a really small part of the equation in terms of what should be merited for new supply in the vanadium industry. And, for those of us who are not familiar with redox batteries, I'd just like to say a couple things. They were invented by an Australian in, the 1970s. It's a very mature technology, and it has been used at scale all over the world. And, so what we're proposing to do here in the vanadium industry is not to create a high-risk new technology sector. We're just proposing to take a technology that previously probably didn't have the right fit, but with the renewable energy grid scale applications we are seeing, it is absolutely merited, and on a technical basis is, we think, superior to other technologies out there. So just to quickly go through, their long duration, you can cycle them over and over and over and have very limited to no degradation in the battery. They will last at least 20 years to our current knowledge, and we really think there's no reason they can't last longer. And against lithium ion, which is sort of the flavor of the day in grid storage, energy storage, there are real merits to this battery in terms of being non-flammable, being technically safer, and being a more robust solution. So then the question is, are they economic? And my answer is yes. For long duration, anywhere above about 4 hours, you start to get very competitive with lithium ion. And the other thing to say here is the world, to do its 2050 targets of decarbonization, we can't just have VRFBs. We think this is just one of many. You're going to need pumped hydro. You're going to need other battery technologies. And lithium units should go into things that move because they are higher energy density. VRFBs are slightly lower, but this is the perfect niche for them. So if you look on a 20-year life cycle basis, and this is where power providers are finally turning their eyes to because they're faced with this daunting challenge, these batteries are highly economic, and they actually always have been on a cost of ownership basis. They've just had a historically higher capital cost. And with some of the cost pressures in the lithium ion industry, we're actually becoming more competitive on an initial cost basis. So then on the dreamy side of the demand curve that's not in any of our forecasts, but I'd encourage our investors to think about is what role might vanadium play in that next horizon. I've just shown a couple here. In particular, this is a snapshot from a slide from a technology provider called Dimion, who's working on really exciting, pretty advanced cathode technology using a vanadium oxide. It's a proprietary vanadium oxide made from industrial scale vanadiums like we will produce. And this has the potential to double or triple energy density in the battery and halve the cost, right? Because 50% of a lithium ion battery cost is the cathode. So I hope you've had a little bit of insight of why we think Australian vanadium is in a good space in the vanadium world. I hope you can open your mind to vanadium not being a niche metal and actually being something that's pretty exciting. Coming back to my lithium tragic story, if you look at a Pilbara Minerals presentation from 2016, you're going to see that they were forecasting demand curves in the thousands of tons of LCE equivalent. And if you look at a presentation now, it's in millions of tons, and it's a pretty remarkable story. The entire demand curve they were forecasting previously looks like this on the demand curve now, and here we are only 6-7 years later. So why Australian vanadium? We are positioned here with a near-term asset. It's a 25-year mine life, and we think it's a highly scalable configuration. We have green lights, and what I want to say is we have all the things that make us very likely to succeed in our endeavor to be a near-term producer. Our relationships at all levels of government are there. We have, I think, a huge endorsement, and thanks to the federal government for doing this, a $49 million federal grant to really put some wind in our sails and make sure that this project can succeed. And quality of the board and the team, do your own research, but I think I'm just so fortunate to be on a team, both executive and employees, and the board in particular, who are so credentialed, pedigreed, and competent to be the right team to get this project done. And I think, not to be oversighted, just a fun fact, 75% of the world's vanadium supply comes from China, Russia, and South Africa. So there's a strong need to diversify supply. It is a critical metal. It is used in very important industries that support our quality of life. And Western Australia is perfectly positioned to be the right producer now. And I think we can be at the heart of a scalable industry, just like we've done in lithium over the last 8 years. I'll just dive into a couple of these areas. On the board, don't have much time, but I'll highlight a couple of people on here. Daniel Harris has run the largest multinational vanadium companies in the world. You would be hard-pressed to find someone in our industry who doesn't really respect him and know that he knows what he's doing. And I'm very fortunate to have him on the board and as someone who leans in and supports me and coaches me. We recently appointed Miriam Stanborough and Peter Watson, and I think that's an incredible vote of confidence for our business, that they have looked at us as a team and as a business and said, this is fascinating, I'm all in. And Cliff Lawrenson is the chair. I get to talk to him every week, and he is just wonderfully supportive and pedigreed in terms of someone who can and will help take this business where it needs to go. Last but not least, Todd Richardson is our COO, and I just want to highlight he has stewarded this asset for the last 5 years in terms of having the right technical acumen behind all the process development, which in our industry is the most important thing that's going to make us succeed. I'm very fortunate to work with Todd. He is really top class, and he has 20, 30 years of experience, all in vanadium. So we've got a wonderful team here. I'd encourage you to go read the BFS, which is less than a year old. I think it's an important facet of our business that we have a relatively recent BFS to a very high standard. And these numbers, as I'm going to show you in a minute, I think put this asset as a highly competitive asset in almost any economic scenario. So if you believe even a small amount of the forward demand curve, you would say build this asset as soon as possible. And so why do we think we're competitive? This is the supply curve. Terry Perlis, again, he's one of the most respected market forecasters in vanadium, and he tracks all the vanadium producers in the world. You can see that our C1 OPEX is at the low end of that cost curve. And I spoke about Daniel Harris. His whole view of the vanadium world, having lived through many of those cycles, is if you can produce vanadium pentoxide for less than $5 a pound, you can weather any storm and you have a great business. And that's what we have been laser focused on since really pulling together right from scoping to feasibility to now being ready to develop the project. This is again Terry Perlis, and I think it's insightful to look back in time, not to say that the future is going to be the past, but this is the 2023 dollars inflated version of what the historical pricing has been in the industry. And I think you can see here that in every scenario we would have lived and survived in the past, and I think that's a good indication that we can do so in the future. And I think importantly here, even right now as we speak, we're in the $9 to $12 per pound lithium vanadium industry, and that means we've got a great asset. I really, really believe that. For those that don't know, we're situated in the Midwest. Our mine is near the town of Meekatharra, and we will haul a high-grade concentrate to our processing plant at Tanindwa. That's just outside Geraldton. We've done some deep thinking about why we've split those assets, and there's lots of good reasons. The main ones are really good access to gas, really good access to rail, and good access to port. And this will, you'll see in a minute, I think, play into how we think we can play a key role enabling other businesses and ourselves to scale the vanadium industry into the future. So this is a bit more of a deep dive on that area. You can see here we have sort of like 1 billion tons of VTM-style deposits like ours in the region. How we've situated this asset is that we can maximize the economic value of our asset, the Australian Vanadium project, keep scaling that, but also work, like the recently announced collaboration with Neometals, work with other partners to see how we can help unlock value and share in greater benefits where 1 + 1 = 3. And if you look at the demand curves, the industry needs to be scaled, and it needs to be scaled in jurisdictions like Western Australia, and I think we're perfectly positioned to play a big role in that. So where are we with the project? We are laser focused on a strategy to get us to financial investment decision. And what that involves is finalizing finance arrangements, and as a subset of that, seeking offtake arrangements. And we are in a fortunate position to be in an industry that needs vanadium, and we want to make sure we take the time and get the best possible partners. And that's something I learned in the lithium industry, is having the right offtake partners can make or break you, and we want to make sure that we have the people next to us as partners who have the right mindset and want to go on the journey with us and hopefully grow with us into the future. Alongside all that, we are front-loading as much as we can all the things that are going to keep adding value to this company. And I think you'll see through our actions up until now and ongoing, all those things are really going to continue to give us wind in the sails towards financial investment decision, and really just de-risk the project and continue to add value in the meantime. The funding model, I'm not going to spend any time on this really. I just want to say this is well advanced. We appointed debt advisors over 12 months ago. We're really feeling confident that there's a good suite of opportunities for us to secure good debt financing for the project. We have that $49 million grant that I spoke about earlier that will make the equity side a lot easier. And we have Canaccord in our camp helping us work through the equity side as well. So, watch this space. We've got lots of work to do to raise money for this endeavor, but we're feeling confident we can get there. Last but not least, and I want to say on ESG, we're very fortunate at Australian Vanadium that, if coming back to the why vanadium slide is, everything we do will be linked to decarbonization. So almost by definition, our activities are laser focused on ESG principles. We are very fortunate to work with the Yaganya peoples out near Meekatharra, and I've been personally fortunate to be in several meetings with them that I felt were incredibly open and trusting and sharing, and I just want to pay my respect to the traditional owners that we work with up there and thank them for their open-mindedness and their willingness to take someone like me and help me understand how they value the land and how I can share that land with them. So thanks to that. On the governance side, we acknowledge we are not a super mature business, but some of us, including me, have come from businesses that are mature in the ESG space, and we're working very closely with other partners to make sure we're on that journey, and we recognize it can't be done overnight, but by the time we get into production, I expect to be a very respected ESG credentialed business in the endeavor that we're undertaking. The vertical integration optionality of this business is really important to us. Now, I was pleased to see Minister Johnston this morning putting vanadium up in lights on that map and in his bullet points on the slides. Vanadium is one of the metals, and I think the metal, that actually makes sense to go right from pit to battery in Australia. And I think in the lithium industry, we're going into precursors and other things, and I think that's wonderful. The space that you can go into with Redox batteries, because of the nature of these batteries, is you can actually economically manufacture them here. So I think watch that space, and I want to say we're open-minded to how Australian Vanadium and our subsidiary VSUN, how do we participate in that whole commercial economic spectrum is really important, and I think offers lots of opportunity and optionality in the business. Recently, we gave the market a really good update, and I hope it was exciting for you guys as it was for me. We are proceeding at pace with the electrolyte facility. Again, thanks to the government for backing us in with the grant. That's a wonderful vote of confidence. Here we're partnered with US Vanadium, a company that we have a very close relationship based out of Arkansas in the US. They are supplying the highest grade electrolyte in the world right now as we speak into VRFBs in the US, and we have a technology agreement with them to build the same flow sheet they use in the US here in Australia. And we expect to be first movers, and we expect to produce the highest grade electrolyte here in Perth initially, and we're talking to and looking for opportunities on the East Coast where we think there's even bigger opportunities in VRFBs. Last but not least, VSUN Energy is a sub-entity of AVL, 100% ownership, and historically what that business has been about is stimulating demand for vanadium redox flow batteries. They have been out there just pounding the turf, educating IPPs and all persuasions of power producers about the merits of these batteries and the economic merits. And what that's done is create a wonderful pipeline and some insight for us into how that industry is going to unfold here in Australia. You know, some of the biggest jurisdictions in the world for VRFBs by far is China and the US. But actually, if you look at what's happening in Australia for us, that's a real serious opportunity. And you know, we're pleased that there are some respected power entities out there now calling for VRFBs in their designs and tenders, and we've been partnering with them to help them understand that. I'm going to close. In summary, I hope I've given you a taste of vanadium, and hopefully you've been open-minded enough to think that maybe this is not a niche metal, maybe this is something very interesting. It's not just a steel alloying metal. And I think importantly, all those areas of growth, and they are all growing right now, are linked to the thematic that all of us are really wading into, which is decarbonization. And why Australian Vanadium? We have a world-class team here that knows how to build projects, how to operate them, and has deep, deep experience in vanadium. So thanks for your time, and I welcome any questions if there are any.